All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I have the great pleasure of saying the fewest words tonight. So my name is Jennifer Rittner. I am the interim chair of the MA program in Design Research, Writing, and Criticism here at SVA. And we are an intensive one-year program that's devoted to the study of design in all of its contexts and consequences. I am very lucky to be sitting in as chair. Molly Hines is actually the chair of the department, and I also teach design history here. And so David Reinfurt's book is really just like a sort of a perfect artifact for us to be discussing in this space. So I am not going to introduce David. I'm actually introducing you to an alum of the program, Carissa Senevides. Did I say your name last name? Senevides. I should have asked that beforehand. Who is going to introduce David and then afterward help to moderate the Q&A. So thank you all for coming here tonight and enjoy. Thank you, Carissa.
Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to be able to introduce David Reinfurt tonight. Sorry. I keep saying Reinfeld. I don't know why. I apologize. Anyway, so I just wanted to share some personal experiences. The reason I jumped at the chance to introduce David is David's work has been foundational to my understanding and approach to what a design practice can be, and his work with Dexter Sinister in particular with ... was such an influential series that influenced not just my idea of what content could be, but also the means of production, that everything was considered. And David's work has also just touched my gestures, my daily gestures, because as one of the designers of the MetroCard, New York City MetroCard kiosk, that interface that he helped design is imprinted in the muscle memory of everyone that regularly rides the subway. So just with those two projects, I think he's touched most of the lives in this room, but there's plenty more. There's the Muriel Cooper exhibition and book. There's the work that he does in the Princeton University teaching, and the wonderful ongoing series of the Serving Library, which introduces me to all kinds of wonderful things. So today we're going to talk about or focus on one particular newer work, the a new program for graphic design. And this is a book in partnership with Inventory Press, another wonderful organization that I have great affection for. And I remember specifically the Street Value book launch, where we did a walking tour of Fulton Mall, which was super awesome, and influenced my whole reading of that book. And so we're just going to be focused on a new program for graphic design tonight, and that is introduced with the idea that graphic design is the most liberal of arts because it has no subject. So no matter what material we cover tonight, I'm sure it'll be fascinating. Please help me welcome David Reinfurt.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that introduction. Yep. And thank you to SVA for having me here to talk. Am I legible enough? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, very good. Then I won't strain. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this book, but I'm going to talk about another book first. Okay. This book right here is called A Primer of Visual Literacy. This is a graphic design textbook. It was published by MIT Press in 1973. It's currently in its 22nd edition, its 22nd printing. This book is influenced or been used in graphic design teaching since then, which is indicated by how many times it's been reprinted. The cover's always fascinated me. The book itself has always fascinated me. I've used it in my teaching regularly. It's a book which has its limits, but it has some strengths, for sure. Okay, that book came out of a friendship and a dialogue between these two women, between Donis A. Dondas, who we see on the left, and Muriel Cooper, who is on the right. This image, I mean, they're made of ASCII here, right? This image was made in a computer programming workshop the two of them enrolled in at MIT in 1968, taught by Nicholas Negroponte, who went on later to form the MIT Media Lab. The Dundas and Muriel Cooper had a long-running friendship since they studied together at Massachusetts College of Art. Since then, they were both remained in Boston and Cambridge and continued a long-running conversation around how to teach graphic design, what are the limits of graphic design, what are the stakes with graphic design, etc. Dundas was, at the time, associate professor at Boston University. She was importantly, she was in the School of Public Communication. And her work, she was particularly interested in television, which in 1973, it was the mass media that was most pervasive in their lives. Muriel Cooper at the time was design and media director at MIT Press. She was also just setting up a teaching facility called the Visible Language Workshop, which would mix production and printing and teaching all in one space in overlapping configurations. While I was, as was mentioned in the introduction, I produced an exhibition and a book around the work of Muriel Cooper. While I was doing that work, I stumbled across a binder. It was a binder of 35 millimeter slides. Actually, there are several of these. 35 millimeter slides that were used for class lectures. They were labeled simply A Primer of Visual Literacy, the name of this book. And in fact, they had notes throughout them, many of the notes which seemed to drive the text of the book, of this textbook. Those slides, it turns out, were a shared resource between Dundas and Muriel Cooper across the river. To use in their teaching, because of course it wasn't so easy as to just send across a keynote deck or something like that. So these were the material basis of what became that book, and that always kind of lodged in my brain as an interesting model. I thought that was great. Okay. The book itself is quite straightforward. It's didactic. It aims to teach you the fundamental principles of graphic design. So when I say it's limited, this is where I find the limits. You can feel it trying to lay out a set of rules, which I'm not sure are so entirely valid, but in its clarity, it's a great book to use in classes, especially when you kind of set it off against some other textbooks. Okay. Let me read the preface from this book, and then we'll get off this one and into the one we're talking about. The preface says, and this lays out what was at stake in making the book in the first place. Preface says, if the invention of movable type created a mandate for universal verbal literacy, surely the invention of the camera and all its collateral and continually developing forms makes the achievement of universal visual literacy an educational necessity long overdue. Film, television, visual computers are modern extensions of the designing and making that has historically been a natural capability of all human beings and now seems to have been isolated from human experience. So visual computers have appeared, and now it's time to read images in the same way that we read words. Pretty straightforward proposal, hence a primer of visual literacy. Meanwhile, since this book was published, of course, things have changed completely. Visual computers are in our pockets. The visual computers I mentioned, they're in our pockets, and they are massively networked one to the other. And of course, on your computer, laptop, your phone, whatever, an individual designer can write, design, produce, and distribute a message more or less immediately. And this is done in fluid conversation, back and forth, multiplied over a network, over social networks in particular, collected by search engines, archived, and forming an almost entirely new envelope, like information envelope, that we live in and we need to find our way around. We need to figure out how we can navigate this thing. So this is the book we're here to talk about. I'll introduce it a bit in a second. But in thinking about when I was approached by Inventory Press in 2016 with the idea that maybe the teaching I'd been doing at Princeton at that point for 8 years would be relevant to a wider audience, I immediately said, I don't want to make a textbook. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense. It's nothing like the way that I teach. It's not what I think about. But there might be a way to make some sort of book which offers a model of kind of how you might use graphic design as much as a kind of vehicle to move around or to kind of navigate this like all over information smog. It's a way to read what's out there as well as to make it. And in fact, this reading and writing at the same time, I think, is an essential part of what graphic designers do right now and what distinguishes, well, anyway, what makes it a discipline. Okay. I'm going to read the preface from our book. That's a parallel. I've never made these books quite so parallel, although when we made this one, we had an initial working title of A New Primer of Visual Literacy, so obviously it was directly influenced by the other, but we never meant to continue the other. Okay, here's the preface to this. This is an experiment. That's the first thing to know, and everybody here is a part of it. It's maybe a harebrained idea to perform a book rather than write one, but here it is. Each of the next 3 days will cover one of my graphic design courses at Princeton University, delivered as a consecutive series of slide lectures. All of this will be video recorded and transcribed to form the basis of a new publication so that what's said here now is also writing a book elsewhere in the future. Okay, I'm going to back out of that for just a second and give you a little bit of background. So, as was touched on in the introduction, I'm an independent graphic designer. I've worked that way for 20 years in New York. Recently I figured out, I'm not an independent graphic designer at all. I'm absolutely a dependent graphic designer. All of my work happens, it's the case, all of my work happens with other people and under other names and in different collaborations and situations. I think this is how you have to make design work. I for whatever reason, disposition or whatever, I work in multiple arrangements myself, which I give names. So I work, and these three symbols represent those. So on the left is ORG, which is a one-person organization working principally on software projects. It's a small software publisher these days. The second in the middle is Dexter Sinister, and that's two people. That's myself together with Stuart Bertolotti Bailey. We work on design projects and art projects and things that kind of fall in between those areas. And the third symbol over there on the right is the Serving Library, and that's a project currently of 4 people. It was founded by Stuart Bertolotti Bailey, myself, and writer and artist Angie Kiefer. Now it includes Francesca Bertolotti Bailey also and Vincenzo Latronico. So that's 4 people. The Serving Library is principally a publishing project. We edit and produce a journal once a year and give away all the content online as well. Redundantly, it consists of newly commissioned writings. Each issue revolves around a theme. Okay. None of these practices are discrete. They always bleed into each other. I think I've done myself a disservice, perhaps, although in making it kind of vague where my identity lies, but you kind of work with what you have. So, at the same time, over the course of the 20 years, I've always taught, usually adjunct, recently more committedly. For the last 10 years, I've been teaching at Princeton University. At Princeton University, I was invited in to offer a graphic design course. I was invited by Joe Scanlon, who was the new director of the visual arts program, invited in to give a graphic design course that had not previously existed at Princeton. And in fact, it met initial kind of resistance within the administration, the university replying that we're not a trade school. We don't teach graphic design as a trade, and that's not what we do. Took a little convincing, not very much, as it turns out. And we started the first course, which was called Typography. At Princeton, the courses I give are to undergraduate students. They're liberal arts students. They're from any other discipline that's not design. You don't really come to Princeton necessarily to study design. They could be from English. They could be from anthropology or German or computer science. I get a lot of computer science majors. Anyway, and I like to think about teaching graphic design itself as a liberal art. And so all I mean by that is it's a separate body of knowledge or kind of method approach that you can learn, and then it inflects everything else that you do. And so you take that and you kind of use that knowledge in order to think about or even apply it to what you're doing. I've heard somebody else claim that it's I think it's the most liberal of arts because it has no subject matter of its own, and then somebody else described it as a discipline without the discipline of another discipline, which sounds good, but I'm not quite exactly sure what it means. That's okay. So the first class I started at Princeton University was called typography. It was a way to introduce beginning students to kind of fundamental aspects of graphic design. It was a reading and a making course. So the students would read text about history, typography, and then typeset in various ways many of the things that they read. That course was pretty successful. Second course I developed was called Gestalt. And this was a course that layered early 20th century psychology together with graphic design. So the students, because of the way they work, they are capable of kind of investing in the history of psychology at the beginning of the 20th century to do with perception. And then they also do practical hands-on graphic design projects. If typography is a class that's about letters and their forms and how that communicates, this is maybe things that aren't letters, to be very coarse about it. The third course that I established doesn't really fill in any gap, but it's an advanced course, and it's just called Interface. And I just simply think we look at a screen all the time, we use interfaces all the time. This is where the stakes are the highest for graphic design, so I think it deserves a study in and of itself. It's a good fit with the Princeton students I'd been seeing up to that point. Okay. All right, so by this point, there have been a number of other people who have helped at Princeton develop these courses. Alice Chung, Danielle Aubert, Francesca Grassi, Laura Coombs, David Sellers, Peter Kantzatev, Nathan Carter have all either taught or helped develop all these courses. So clearly it was not me in any way. It's usually me and one other person teaching during a semester is how it's worked so far. Okay. So as I mentioned, in 2016, Inventory Press came and said, what you're doing at Princeton, we think it could be a wider thing, and maybe we could make a book. That developed into a conversation where we landed on the idea of, rather than writing a book, which I did not have any, it was right after I finished Muriel Cooper, which was a very enjoyable project, but I'm not a writer of that kind natively, and I did not have any interest in writing a long book. I thought it'd be much more interesting to have it evolve in some other way. So we landed on the idea of speaking the book rather than writing the book. At the time, Inventory Press was based out of this office in Los Angeles in Silver Lake, which was the former offices of architect Richard Neutra. It's a specific space. And so we landed on the idea of staging 3 days of talks in Los Angeles, where each day would comprise one of the Princeton courses. I give slide talks in the courses. They're usually design, history, and you'll get a feeling of them in a minute. But so each day would cover one course. First day was typography, second day was Gestalt, third day was interface. These days consisted of 6 45-minute lectures a day, attended by about 60 mixture of students and professionals and whomever who came to the space and watched the lectures and kind of helped it come about. There are 15-minute breaks in between, which were punctuated by modular synthesizer music and by juices, and it was kind of it had a lively atmosphere, which made it a lot easier to do. So each day compressed one semester-long design course. I'm going to show just a little bit of setting up for the first day to give you some idea of what it sounded like and looked like. So, lecture room set up like this, kind of specific. We set the stage. It was all video recorded, and of course the sound was captured as well. Being Los Angeles, this was professionally done, which added a certain quality to it. As we proceeded through the days, the breaks became more and more wild. And so people started bringing their own, well, as it turns out, synthesizers and other music-making things in between. And anyway, the entire thing had a kind of group carnival feeling to it, if watching 6 45-minute slide lectures is a carnival. Not really. Okay. So first day covered typography. Here's an image of videographer set up to do that. He was a fabulous videographer who works under the name Los Angeles. I'm sure that's why he was hired. He brought in his synthesizer, started playing. It was all fun. Second day was Gestalt. Things were still going strong, a new mixture of people. This is about the size of the crowd, and it's a little bit emptier than it was, whatever. It's about like that. And by the third day, when we were doing interface, my voice was completely shot that morning. But it picked up after I woke up or something, and we were able to continue on and finish up all of the 18 lectures, all in total. By the end of the time, it kind of, also we set up an exhibition of all of the graphic design student classes at Princeton. We made an exhibition from their work over the previous 8 years, which played as videos on the back screen like this. And, you know, by the end, the kind of synthesizer music was rather, was about as tired as I was. Looked something like this. Okay. So the things I showed were the slideshows that I give in class. They usually are to do with graphic design history. I attempt to bring in models of people who not necessarily like register as clear graphic designers, but who have qualities of they're definitely generalists, and they can often write and produce as well as like give form to things. I also show a lot of my own work in these slide lectures, which at first I was uncomfortable with teaching, but I realized pretty quickly that that when sitting in a class, I always like to know where the teacher was coming from, and so I'm very upfront about doing that. And as well, teaching, I always think, is absolutely integral to all the other work I'm doing, and I make sure that's the case. I have a feeling it produces a livelier class. It's never something I do outside of the other work. It's always as continuous as I can make it. Okay. So now I'm going to read the end of the preface, and then we're going to do a little kind of reenactment of these days, which will be much shorter than 3 days. Yeah. Give the right page. Okay, at the end of the preface, I write this, which maybe gives an indication, and you got to realize everything is written in here was spoken in that room, or spoken and edited, rewritten maybe. Okay, end of the preface. This certainly is not a carefully crafted collection of rules, guidelines, and methods intended to shore up graphic design as a relevant discipline. It is inevitably more of a digressive, discursive ramble and occasionally high-speed pitch across any number of subjects and settings, though never possibly enough. Anyone else, by definition, would do this differently. It's limited as much by my imagination and by my experience as by the practical constraints of a book. But in its form is also its argument. So let me be explicit. When you've finished a new program for graphic design, rip it up, throw it away, and get busy assembling your own. Now let's get started. And I mean that. It's not just being clever, coy. Like what I'm trying to always get across in the classes is you need to build up some interests as a designer, or you're going to get pushed around by the industry. And if you want to kind of if you want to move in the way you want to move through this, it really is incumbent on you to provide that internal interest in material. And you have to build it for yourself. You can't take it from anybody else. That's it. Okay, so now is the more slightly livelier part, or more train wrecky part. Let's see. What I've done is I've taken all of those slideshows that I showed in Los Angeles. So 18 slideshows, 18 keynotes, put them all together, put them in one QuickTime movie. And that's overlaid with a soundtrack that's the soundtrack that was playing there, and we're gonna see that movie playing, and I'm gonna let it go, and I'll just stop every once in a while and talk about whatever's on screen. We could make this more interesting if other people say when to stop. Yeah? Okay. We'll start. Okay. You know what? We're going to go back to this one because I'm picking the first one. I like this one. Okay. This is from the first slide lecture in typography. This is a letter T drawn by my daughter when she was 3 years old. This is about the time I was figuring out or trying to develop that course and making this first lecture. It's a particular T. But I remember distinctly while watching her draw it, she was learning to write and read at the same time, which is what we do as humans. And as she was scratching this T out and doing it again and again, I was acutely aware of the kind of muscle memory that she was building in doing that, and the way in which drawing that shape was etching that shape in her mind. And so that combination of making the mark and learning how to read the mark, this made me think about how intimately those processes are connected. That forms the basis of the way that I approach the typography class. I asked the students to read a collection of texts on the history of, from the history of typography. And then I asked them to typeset these texts. And they begin working in a letterpress type shop with metal type. And they work in pairs, and they set a collective text over the course of 4 weeks, just setting letter after letter after letter after letter after letter, which is a nice break from what they do the rest of the time at Princeton. They move on to a kind of stand-in for photo typesetting, and then they move on to the computer finally, and the texts kind of get faster and faster as the reproduction processes as well accelerate. Anyway, that's the letter T. This is the next thing in that slideshow. This is a drawing from Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. This also figures into the first introductory typography slideshow. If you remember Charlotte's Web, you'll remember that it's a story of a pig and a spider and their special relationship. The pig's name is Wilbur. Wilbur lives on a farm. It's not very good to be a pig and live on a farm because your days are numbered. And Charlotte, the spider, realizes this and doesn't want to see her friend Wilbur killed. And she resorts to typography to stand in the way. She realizes that if she can weave a web, and if she weaves something above Wilbur's cage, above Wilbur's pen, then in the morning when the farmer shows up, when Lurvy shows up, he'll say, oh, this is an amazing, miraculous pig. We're not going to kill this pig. That happens, and Wilbur is saved for now. Fast forward about 6 months, and Wilbur's due to be slaughtered once again, and at this point, Charlotte gets a bit more frantic and realizes she has to do a bit better with her typography. She doubles down, and there's a very beautiful section in the novel where she describes, where it comes from the point of view of Charlotte, and she describes what it's like to draw the word terrific in a double thickness letter form that will make it seem even more miraculous that Wilbur the pig is still standing. And anyway, he is saved once again. Okay. Okay, this which I'll play forward a little bit. I think the first time I gave the typography slide lecture, this is a 20-minute artwork video by Dennis Oppenheim, where he, as you see, first he traces on his son's back a shape, which is then transferred. You know, you feel it, and then you write it on the wall, and then that process is reversed. First time I gave this slide lecture, it's about 20 minutes, this film, and I shared the whole thing, and I'm sure the students were like ready to kill me. Since then, I've shown it in much smaller doses. I've learned like how that actually works. Okay. I'm not going to show stuff from every talk, so we'll just... Are we ready for somebody to say stop? This is a photogram made by Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. As we move on from the metal type shop, I have them work with a text. In the metal type shop, they're typesetting the Crystal Goblet by Beatrice Ward, a kind of very straightforward introductory text about how typography might behave. But Beatrice Ward is a great example of somebody who is an eloquent writer and a good communicator and could also do typography and merge those together to have her voice kind of entered into a larger conversation. Moholy-Nagy, when we move on to the photocopier, the text I give them is called The New Typography. It's a brief text. It argues for a kind of synthesis of photography and typography and a new kind of overall visual communication. So I show them a bunch of pictures of Moholy's photograms, as I think these things these things look like typography to me. And they as well use the direct printing of an object onto photosensitive paper, much like the impression of a metal letter onto paper. Okay, we'll keep on going. Anybody? Oh, stop. Okay. Sorry. I think our stop was a bit back. So I'm going to go back to our stop. Stop was somewhere around there. This is a drawing. It's an original drawing from a book by Bruno Minari, Italian artist and designer working in the 20th century. It turns out that Princeton, in their children's library, has a great collection of original Bruno Minari materials. I don't know how they landed there. I've meant to find out. But this is one of them. And this is a drawing from a book called Drawing a Tree. Now, this drawing is based on a drawing by, as Bruno Minari describes it, I think in the introduction, he says, the image that's on the front of the book, which is this, was borrowed from a countryman of mine, is what he says, a certain Leonardo from the town of Vinci, postcode whatever, B something, something, something. Anyway, but I like the fact that he's explicit in taking an old idea and just doing it again, not even updating it, but simply kind of recirculating that idea. This book offers a recipe for how to construct a tree. It's really simple, how to draw a tree. Take one form, divide it into two, each of the branches slimmer than the one that comes before, and continue that process recursively as you go on down. That draws a tree. They're branching patterns of 3, 4, and 5, but principally it's a 2 branching pattern. But by following this recipe shows what happens when wind is blowing on the tree. Of course, you get a tree that looks like this. What happens when the tree is tall and skinny, and when it's reaching up towards the sun, or what happens when the tree has no leaves, which happens at one point during the year. What I really like about this collection of drawings and about that book as well is I think I talk about, the name of this lecture is T as in tree. And I talk about these as a form of typography themselves. They're a collection of differences and family resemblances, like styles, which articulate where you can see an underlying structure, and then you can see all the variations of the things. There's also a quality to these and much of Bruno Minari's work. That's an S, found in the wild in Canada. I was amazed when I saw that. Here's a self-portrait of Bruno Minari. It's telling that many of his self-portraits erase his face. And I think a lot of his work, in his best-known translated English book, he introduces himself as, I'm the man, you might know me as the man who made those useless machines. Like he was modest, I think. Or modest in a certain way. He was also funny, like what he was able, and he could write, and he could communicate. And the work he made found a kind of larger platform as a result. I think we're going to continue on, but we're going to watch this. This is one of his useless machines for which he was well known. You might know them as mobiles, but he made a very crisp distinction between his useless machines, which he invented first, and Alexander Calder's mobiles, which were named by Marcel Duchamp, because Calder wanted to call them stabiles. It's pretty lame. Okay. we'll continue on. Whoa. Great, that's a good one. This is a poster. This is a poster for a traveling exhibition named Asterisk. You can see, I love this poster. I love this poster because of the way in the asterisk is both in the title and it's also a functional device. So that asterisk refers to the thing at the top, which tells you what it's a poster for. It's elements of a traveling exhibition by the fellows from the Center for Advanced Visual Studies at MIT. This is a poster I found in the context, this occurs in a slideshow about the work of Muriel Cooper in the Visible Language Workshop at MIT. This poster was, I found this when I started working on a client design relationship with the Center for Advanced Visual Studies, which led down the rabbit hole to chasing Muriel Cooper's work across the university for a number of years. This poster is enlarged from a tiny little, from a small napkin sketch. It's drawn by Otto Pina, who is an artist who was running the Center for Advanced Visual Studies during the mid-1970s. It was printed in the Visible Language Workshop. I think we're going to see just a little bit forward, and we're going to see a picture of that. But I will show this. When I started working on the design project for the Center for Advanced Visual Studies, I began by going through a closet of existing printed materials they had because I wanted to find out what the place had looked like in the past and also what had happened there. Posters carry the graphic form, which gives some indication of kind of where it sits in culture and in the university and et cetera, but also they literally describe what happened and when it happened. So I went through that archive, made a series of pictures, laid them all out on the floor, and made this kind of modest image. No, we're not going to get to the picture I'd like to get to. But anyway, that project, that poster, and that exploration of those projects led me into tracking the work of Muriel Cooper at MIT. I will, however, show... I would like to find one image. Okay. This is the Visible Language. This is Muriel Cooper. This is Ron McNeil. The two together founded the Visible Language Workshop at MIT, which was a teaching facility that had a pretty significant influence on the way I would like to approach teaching. It was centered around two offset printing presses that Ron McNeil had found and gotten access to. The students at MIT were a hands-on group. Muriel Cooper and Ron McNeil kind of met around this idea of teaching a course that would center around the printing presses. So the students would learn hands-on about offset printing, and they would talk about design, and they would actually produce materials for the school. In fact, and so here's a MIT student in the press trying to debug it. They made prints that used the offset printing press as a kind of expressive possibility. They made one-night prints. The workshop mixed photographic darkrooms with offset printing, and eventually computers came into the mix as well. Oh, here's the picture I was looking for. Great. Once I started looking into the work of Muriel Cooper and the Visible Language Workshop, I stumbled on this image with a group of students gathered around the press, and I found that asterisk poster sitting there on the back as if it was a little like asterisk back pointing backwards in time. And I figured out that this poster was indeed actually printed at the Visible Language Workshop. So this facility, this teaching facility, was also involved in making all the posters that were announcing events at the school. So that tight feedback loop between learning something and doing it and seeing where it fails and how it works or does not work was in a pretty concentrated form at MIT in this situation. And I think it likely yielded people who thought about design in a pretty interesting way. I think I'll continue. There's plenty more to get through. I don't want to talk too long either. Anybody? Curse. Okay. This is a page from a catalog produced for the Queens Museum of Art. It was designed and edited by Dexter Sinister, by myself, and Stuart Bertolotti Bailey. We were invited by Larissa Harris. Oh, this is a good combination. This is a good overlap. Larissa Harris was the client at the Center for Advanced Visual Studies. She moved on to the Queens Museum and we've continued to do lots of work together over the years. Of course, designed to practice it in an ambitious way. You need clients who will come along who will support this kind of approach. This is a catalog for an exhibition at the Queens Museum called The Curse of Bigness. For that exhibition, Dexter Sinister was invited as an artist in the show to contribute. What we offered was to design and edit a catalog for the show and to design a typeface, which would be used to set all the graphics in the show. This is a still of that typeface, one of the versions of it. These are a couple spreads from the catalog. That's Louis Brandeis. It's on the back cover. People thought that was Dexter Sinister. I liked. It's Louis Brandeis, trust-busting judge, Supreme Court judge, who influenced the premise of the show. So it was that typeface was used to make all the exhibition signage, and it was at a time when the Queens Museum was in a transition period, and so we were asked to make temporary signage for the whole museum, so we ended up doing all the signs for the panorama of the city of New York in this typeface. That was fun. It lasted for a while, and then, anyway. This typeface, I think I'll move just slightly forward here. This typeface, which you see here as well, was itself an involved project. It was based on an older computer software type design project called Metafont, developed by Donald Knuth, and that's the subject of this lecture in the typography class. It's the last one. It's called Mathematical Typography. Donald Knuth is a retired professor at Stanford of computer science. He developed a early computer typesetting software called TeX and its companion software called Metafont. I was always interested in the way that Metafont was described, how you would draw or program letters that had a kind of essential intelligence to them, where rather than defining an exact outline of a letter, you design a skeleton form and then trace it with a kind of metaphorical software tool with a pen. And that makes the form change widely. What you're seeing here are, we ended up making a version of this typeface, of our updated version of Metafont, which we called Meta, the difference between the two font. We made a version which very slowly changed over time, and that was done for the Cadist Art Foundation, an organization based in Paris and in San Francisco, where we entered into a 10-year agreement with them to use this typeface as their logo, but to have it run on a server and automatically every month pop out a new version of the typeface that's subtly different than the one before. They agreed to not change their identity for 10 years, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but when you're talking with art institutions, it is. We signed, when we launched this project, we had a software lawyer and a kind of ritual signing in blood where we agreed to keep the software running for 10 years, not easy, and they agreed not to get fickle about their identity. It's been running for about 5 years, I believe, at this point. And actually, I want to show you right here is the typeface goes all over the place. I want to show you a kind of artist rendering of what it would look like over 10 years. Now, this thing is running on a random walk, so I don't know where it's going to go. But here's what, here it's very quick, because I sped it up. Anyway, it would change all over the place is the essence. Okay, I think I should keep on going. Okay, now we're into the Gestalt class. We've just entered it. Anybody stop? Stop to have no more music? Okay. This is a spiral graphic that was used by Gestalt psychologists in the early 20th century. This was used to test how we perceive things in motion from discrete frames, say in a film. This is really important at the beginning of the 20th century. How does the brain do that? And is that different than perceiving real motion? The Gestalt psychologists came to a pretty radical conclusion that when we perceive motion from discrete frames, if they're close enough together, the perceptual fact is identical to our kind of quantum vision or like discrete vision of things in motion. they use this spiral, slowly rotating, continuously rotating, and then rotating with discrete steps in between to make their point, to do their experiments. It goes along through the class. The class addresses these ideas around how we perceive both forms in motion, but also how we hold melodies in our head, and how we understand relationships between things that are where the relationship is primary, not the parts. So Gestalt is often kind of misdescribed as like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And it's exactly not that. It's rather the whole is something totally different than the parts. It's not even made up of the parts. We perceive the world in wholes. Those come first. They can't be broken down. That's it's had a direct influence on the teaching of graphic design. It's not had such a good time within psychological discourse. Okay, I'll continue on. I think we'll go back here. That is Susan Kerr. This is in the introductory lecture to Gestalt. Susan Kerr is a graphic designer, interface designer. She is based in San Francisco. She designed the graphics, the interface for the graphics for the interface for the first Macintosh computer. She's somebody who we cover in this class. A lot of the figures come in multiple classes. So she appears here. She appears in interface, the advanced class. I guess she doesn't appear in typography, but I like the work that she did to share with students because, like, for example, this control panel from first Macintosh system, which is, I think it's kind of like a Gestalt playground, or kind of a masterwork of Gestalt. Anyway, all of the functions of the computer were novel of a graphic user interface were novel to the users. She had to develop a graphic language that would make this understandable. It was based on existing models, specifically a interface from Xerox, but she had to translate that to a mass audience. And so things like, I always ask the students, like, what is that thing right there? You know, what is that possibly, what does that mean? 0, 1, 2, 3. It turns out it's how many times does the menu, when you drop it down and you select something, how many times does it flash? We've internalized that by this point. At the time, as a novel thing. You had to know what you selected, right? And so just even identifying that as something that would need to be changed is interesting. I like this work as well because it's particularly kind of legible from students. It also seems like it's so far past that it can't possibly be a thing. Anyway. Okay, those are a bunch of arrows. I usually just put the arrows up on the screen and ask the students, what does that mean? Of course, it's a trick question each time. Go back. Okay, we're going to go back to this, which is primer of visual literacy. Go figure. That also factors in several of the courses. I show this image, and I stared at this. I always liked this cover. I think it's surely what drew me to the book. And that image, I always thought it was trying to communicate something, right? It's a code, right? Clearly. It's a code? Maybe? It's saying something. It looks like an A. Anyway, it took me an embarrassingly long time to realize, of course, yes, it is saying something, right? I mean, other people may see it more quickly. I think I got held up because I just like the way it looks so much. But it's saying something. What it's saying, obviously it's a square, a triangle, and a circle in permutations of how many sides are rendered on those figures. And they just repeat line to line. Sometimes you don't see the circle at all because it's only one line, right? It looks like the result of a computer program, kind of algorithmically going through this set of permutations. Of course, it uses the 3 primary shapes, which would be familiar from Vasily Kandinsky and the Bauhaus. However, of course, what it's saying is just that. It's a visual message, right? This book is about reading images. So how dense did I have to be to not understand that for many years? Because this is the crux of the book's argument. I guess I didn't really... But anyway, I was happy when it dawned on me at one point, and embarrassed. The first edition of that book was a hardcover, and the cover looked like this. Second edition is the paperback. That's the one that's widely produced since then, and it looks like this. I like that. That's a very typically Muriel Cooper response to a kind of change in a design brief. Okay. All right. Okay. This is the spinning beach ball of death. This is the first kind of incarnation of it. This was in an operating system for Next Computer, which is where Steve Jobs went to, which is what he founded after he was relieved from his duties at Apple by the board. At Next, he also brought along Susan Kerr to design the interface graphics and some other members of the team. Anyway, the Next computer was more powerful. It was a workstation computer, and whereas the Macintosh used other weight cursors or perceived responsiveness icons to indicate when the computer's busy doing stuff. So on the original Macintosh interface, of course, there was a watch and there was an hourglass. The Windows used an hourglass. There were a series of like hand counting cursors, some other ones. Anyway, the beach ball was a totally novel graphic for this, which appeared in Next Step in that operating system, and then when that was evolved into OS X, literally the code was ported over to OS X, then that beach ball came with it. So I like this as a kind of foundation moment of that one graphic thing. I asked the students, that's a more current version, same thing. The students do an assignment, and the book lists the assignments in here. The students do an assignment where I ask them to design a perceived responsiveness icon, in other words, a weight cursor. And they make animated GIFs. And what I asked them to do in that GIF is to make it work at 40 by 40 pixels and 400 by 400 pixels, and to communicate effectively and poetically, or whatever criteria they want to insert there, what it looks like when something else is going on the computer. Anyway, it's a short assignment. It's a Gestalt assignment. It has to do with how we perceive motion from things in discrete moments. Yeah, there it is spinning. There's the spiral again. There are eyes. Okay. We'll keep on going. Actually, we're going to back up here because it's oh no, we're not going to back up. We're going to keep on going. Okay. You see repetition in some of these because, yes, I repeat. This thing I like a lot. This is a film by Bruno Minori. It is called Time and Time, and it is, as it looks, it is first just a very high-speed film of an acrobat doing a flip. And that's played at normal speed, and then it's slowed down very slow to last 4 minutes. And so you see every interstitial moment of this body position while it's going from one to the other, and you know where it's going, but you don't know exactly what it's going to do. Bruno Minori called that design research, and I find that really kind of compelling. It's making something to learn something. Okay, we're going, that's where I wanted to stop. Not quite there, but we're going to go just back. Okay. Turns out, I try to make a point that all of this, these are not this is not a design history canon. I'm not motivated towards that. This is anecdotal. And so, for example, I learned about Bruno Minori from this man, George Corrin. George Corrin was a set designer and a graphic designer and product designer. He had a studio on 42nd Street between 8th and 9th Avenues in a great old walk-up building at a time when I had a studio on 39th Street and 9th Avenue. We had a mutual friend from theater, and that mutual friend thought George and I would get along. George was in his 80s at this point. I was in my 20s, I guess. And George loved to go get martinis, and it was really fun to go get martinis with somebody who's worked in design that long. So we would go and we would drink, but we'd always start at his studio, which is this amazing, great kind of old old analog studio, and George would show me things. And so he introduced me to the work of Bruno Munari. He pulled out the book Milan and the Fog, which is an amazing children's book that Munari made with vellum pages, and anyway. And that's where that turned me on to that. And so I like to acknowledge that. Turns out George, over time, I kind of figured out he had an absolutely fascinating story. George worked for ABC Television right after receiving an MFA in set design from Yale School of Drama. He was really interested in new technology, and television was new technology in the early 1960s after he just finished his MFA. That MFA followed his studies at Carnegie Mellon in the theater department and set design. When he applied to Carnegie Mellon, he was rejected with a really quick letter from the dean who said, there are other schools who can suit your needs better. And it was because he was black. That's simply that. He replied with a cascade of kind of recommendation letters and was able to change the opinion and was admitted as the first African-American student in the design program at Carnegie Mellon. I didn't learn that until very late, and not from George himself. But anyway, he left Yale, got a job at ABC. It was right at the time when Nixon was running against Kennedy, and they were set to have a series of 3 televised debates. They would be 4 televised debates. They were to be shared among the 3 television networks. George got put on the task of designing the sets. A very important cultural moment. And George worked on the one that was the third debate, I believe. And in that one, the candidates couldn't get in the same room. So Nixon was in Los Angeles, and JFK was in New York in ABC studios. They were joined by a high-speed data cable across the United States run by AT&T. George was tasked with designing the 2 sets so that they could be joined on the television screen. And let's see here. Here are 2 stand-ins when they're kind of mocking it up and testing it. Here is a broadcast. Here's a image from the broadcast at one moment when there's a split screen. They went to extreme lengths to make sure the 2 things were exactly the same. They mixed the paint in New York, all the cans, and flew it out to Los Angeles where they painted sets. They changed the lights in Los Angeles to match the manufacturer of the ones in New York. The fabric was all sourced in New York and also flown to Los Angeles. The event, I'm going to forget the exact number, but a staggering percentage of the United States households with televisions watched this event. It's called the first mass electronic public event. And that was George was at least involved in the set design of that. Pretty amazing, the kind of thing you learn after the fact. There's an image of it. That goes together in a lecture together about Paul Rand, who was working with ABC at the time, and it talks about Paul Rand's adopting the name Paul Rand as a kind of branding moniker for him instead of Peretz Rosenbaum, his given name in Brooklyn, which he thought would limit his kind of entry into the advertising world as being like overtly Jewish name. And so a friend of his suggested, well, Paul Rand has got 4 letters. 4 and 4, it's square. It adds up. It was pretty effective, I would say. So talk a little bit about Paul Rand. Okay. And the gestalt of the ABC logo, which is the last of that time. Okay, we're probably coming to the end, I think. Yeah. So we're not quite into interface, but we're almost there. Okay, now we're in interface. Oh, yeah, that's good. Very good. Okay, interface, I give them one project. It's a semester-long project. When I started the class, Apple Watch had just come out, and I was interested in it and kind of repulsed by it at the same time, or couldn't decide what I thought about it. I'm wearing one now. I guess that says what I think about it. Anyway, when it appeared, I thought, wow, this is really crazy, like a watch. I thought more than that, but immediately when I tried the interface, I thought it was fantastically well done and such a difficult problem to have such a small amount of screen real estate and reconsider all of the kind of conventions of how, say, a mobile interface currently works. So here's a kind of extreme situation of it. Fingers aren't getting any smaller. Display is miniature, and so you have to rethink things in terms of kind of temporal distribution rather than spatial distribution, perhaps. So the assignment I give to the students is a simple one. It's to redesign the one part of the interface that is off limits to developers, and that is the watch face. And I asked them to just come up with a new way to display the time on an Apple Watch, and so that changing display has a consequence. So it changes the way we behave based on how the watch screen looks. We spent an entire semester kind of talking about displays of time and doing sketches around this and various activities. And we get quite in the weeds of the details of how this interface works, because I feel like it offers a lot of instruction that you can extrapolate from it. The students end up making projects that follow the Apple Human Interface guidelines, and so the projects look like they're plausible Apple Watch screens, but they're not available, they're not possible at this point. Through that semester-long project, then the students talk and think about the way that time is displayed and represented, and so it gives them a subject matter to kind of focus an investigation, which is something like design research. This is from the second slideshow in that class. It's called Zapotecs and Pulsars. It is about it deals with pre-Columbian society and the way that they marked time, which is very similar to the Mayan culture, which is well known, the calendar, which has overlapping cycles of secular and religious calendar, and 52-day works out to 52 years, it resets. That lecture talks a bit about how that system works exactly, and then the second half of the lecture, which is about pulsars, is about the first digital we're going to have to forward a little bit to get to it. The first electronic digital watch, which was the Hamilton Pulsar watch, which we're going to see here momentarily after we get through all the art. Maybe. I think we're going to see it. Come on, Hamilton watch. There we go. Anyway, so the second part is about this watch and the design of that and why it looked like it did, or perhaps that's the case. Okay. I think we'll do like maybe one or two stops and then we're done. It's a slideshow around Olivetti and that typewriter company's relationship. It actually takes, okay, stop. Very good. It's a good one, actually, and you know. Okay. So this is a talk about Olivetti, Italian typewriter and increasingly electronic machine manufacturing company, which Bruno Minori collaborated with over a number of years. But this slideshow is about a particular interface, which was designed by Perry King and Santiago Miranda for industrial designers based in Milan, for a series of new machines that Olivetti was making. They were making photocopiers and they were making faxes. And the display panels for those machines used non-articulated buttons, or like flat plastic buttons. I'm getting a little bit like this. This work is chronicled in an amazing book, which is called Design Interface, which I have the students read from, and I'm going to back up to that a bit here. That book takes this very discrete graphic interface problem, and, well, across from the introduction to this project is the Rosetta Stone. And it goes from there to all aspects of all, well, Western cultural development of reading and writing. I mean, it's really massively broad, but also fascinating in that it can work backwards from that small contained project. Here is the book itself. Highly recommend. If you can find it, it's obscure. It works backwards from that very small contained design project to examine, larger, much larger issues. So I offer it up as a kind of model for the way to think about that Apple Watch project. We're getting almost near the end, or very near the end, and so. Anybody? We'll speed it way up. Okay. This on the left is a project, a small 15 centimeter by 15 centimeter cube designed by Bruno Munari, manufactured by Danese Milano, a design gallery and product publisher who Munari worked with very closely in the 1960s and 1970s. This object that's on the left that you see here is 15 by 15 centimeters cubed, 15 by 15 centimeter cube, 15 by 15 by 15 cube. It houses 4 aluminum cones. They're each painted half red and half green, as you can see here. They spin at different rates so that the entire surface changes from all green, there we go, to all red over the course of 18 minutes. This was sold as a consumer product, and its price was relatively low. It was a total flop, but I love it. It's a weirdo Munari project, which addresses so much that it's common in his work that I really am drawn to, which is how one form changes into another form. And in fact, so that's the case of what that is. The project that you're seeing here is the result, is what I did for 6 months while I was a fellow at the American Academy in Rome, where I had time and space to investigate something. And I chose to I was going to investigate Munari's work with Olivetti, which I'd already been interested in and done some things around, but then I narrowed it down to just as one 15 by 15 centimeter cube and spent 6 months staring at this thing and doing different things with it. I'd never seen one moving, and in fact, they made one version that was moving and a later version that sold slightly better, still quite poorly, which had no motors in it whatsoever, so you were meant to move it by yourself, like a prayer wheel or something like this. And so I found somebody with the Tetracono and made a stop frame animation from a bunch of my photographs, which would allow me to see it in process. And what you see here is on the right-hand side is as well and I think if I back up here just a little bit, is a silk screen print that I also made. So when I talk about this as a research project, it was certainly investigating everything I could find out about the Tetracono and how it was made, where it was made, who made it, how many existed. But as well, I wanted to make things because that's what I do. And so I had worked with a silkscreen printer before, based outside of Rome, which would call themselves an industrial artisan silkscreen printer, and they used this machine, which then was hand registered. I love that combination of machine and hand. And I made a large A0 print with them, which took 4 discrete states of the, there's Francesco, the printer. I took 4 discrete prints of the states of the Tetracono, made 4 silk screens from those, or had 4 silk screens made from those. They represented, the cyan plate represented 3 minutes into its 18-minute cycle. The magenta plate represented 6 minutes into its cycle. The yellow plate was 9 minutes into its cycle, and the black plate was 12 minutes into its cycle. And so the resulting print is this kind of like time sandwich, this like impossible Tetracono of like as if you would take all the states of a useless machine and show them at once, which is something Munari did, like it's completely influenced by such. And that's the resulting silkscreen print. You see down in the corner, we also took a bit, so this is something from a Tetracono brochure which Munari had written, where he described the spatial dimension of this object as 15 by 15 by 15, and the temporal dimension is 1,080 seconds. So that's quite beautiful. And so we printed the place when the yellow plate comes in and the magenta plate in time as you go through the process. And maybe that's about as good a place to stop. We don't talk any longer.
David. I'm
happy to do it.
Yeah, can we do questions?
Sure, yeah.
All right.
Just like 2 or 3 because we're running a little.
Oh, fabulous.
But
All right.
We'll continue the.
All right, so we'll go right to the audience then. I don't want to hog the time. Yes, go ahead.
When you stopped it and the father and son were drawing on each other's back.
Yes.
Directly after there was a man playing some sort of conical
Yes.
instrument. What
Yeah.
was that?
An harmonica, which was invented by Benjamin Franklin. And it's like taking, when you take a wine glass, you put water in it and you rub around the edge. this was that, but a whole bunch of those layered. Do you see how it was kind of like one nested within the other? And you play it by placing your finger on those, and those produce different pitches. And he's playing this musical instrument. It's in the context of showing lots of things that Benjamin Franklin invented, like swim fins and medical catheter and circulating library and, so forth. So anyway, that's what that is. Yeah.
Given that your practice involves such a broad scope of subject matter, be it when you're designing or teaching or writing, could you talk about your research methodology and how you synthesize and compartmentalize all that you discover?
That's a good question. I've thought about it a lot, I think. I would say I try not to compartmentalize anything that I'm doing, and that actually helps me move with the research project, I don't even think they're self-directed projects, like they're inevitably invited by somebody somewhere. They're not necessarily commercial. But I think what occurred to me when having the 6 months to really do a kind of self-motivated project in Rome 2 years ago, it occurred to me that, I'm not happy just looking into somebody else's work. I want to make things. But I realize the things that I make can help me think about what ideas were at play then. And so I find it, for myself, a dead end to research something or to treat research in that way. It just doesn't make sense to me. But when it can be integrated with what else I'm making or an opportunity to make something new, then I find it super productive. So even as something as simple as taking the tetragonal and just making a paper model of it at quarter scale sounds elementary, but I learned something about it while doing that. So I think what I try to describe in some of the assignments that are longer running, like the watch assignment, is that those activities aren't separate. You don't kind of research, get the brief, and then go do your 3 designs and choose one, or that's not how I would advocate doing design. I think it's a little bit more looping, iterative process. And I think you have to have some material going into it. You don't start from zero, and you have to continue from one thing to the next. Yeah.
You said that in your school you teach classes to kids who study liberal arts and not necessarily graphic design.
Yes.
I'm just curious about what would you say they say is the thing that they gain the most out of learning about design, even though it's not what they want to do.
I think, of course, the people who sign up for it are already interested, right? And sometimes they don't do it because they don't think it's a proper career, or they have something else they're more interested in. I'd say it's more likely the former. So I think a lot of students are really excited to be in there, frankly. Not because it's a great class, but just because it's this subject matter that's different than the other things that they're taking. And so I think what they usually come away with is something very different than they expect to get when they show up. And I think maybe if they learn anything, it's a kind of iterative way of working, and that that I hope they become less hesitant to start making something. That's it. That's not a very good answer. They don't learn. They do get some get really interested in design as a subject matter and then go read like crazy, and that's amazing. Those students, so they really kind of invest themselves in it, and they don't necessarily go out and practice the design. They want to learn about the history of it or current practices or whatever, and they can know a lot more than I do very quickly. So sometimes it sparks that, but more often it just sparks kind of less fear and just sitting down and starting to make something, more agency.
That sounds really good. That's a great place to end.
Okay,
I
great.
want to make sure that everyone has time to do refreshments and talk more casually out in the other side of the room. And I think you're also open to signing
Yeah.
copies of the book. That's all.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so
There are
much.
books for sale, and I'm happy to.
And there's books for sale.
Thank you.